Ukraine.
Since the start of the Russian aggression, every day offers examples of the illegitimate and inhumane nature of Kremlin's actions. Last night, Russia launched another barbaric attack on Ukraine using Iranian Shahed drones. This is the continuation of indiscriminate drone and missile attacks against the civilian population, including the destruction of a residential building in Zaporizhzhia in the middle of the night a few days ago. That attack alone killed 13 innocent civilians, including a baby. These horrendous actions show the systemic and cynical terror applied by Russia against Ukraine and its people. In this context, the latest work done on accountability in Ukraine over the weekend becomes even more timely. Over the weekend, several important steps have been taken to make Russia pay for its war crimes in Ukraine during the United for Justice conference in Lviv. Let me recap some of the key achievements. An agreement was signed on Saturday that enables the establishment of the new International Center for the Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression against Ukraine. You will remember that President von der Leyen had announced for such a structure to be set up about a month ago. We therefore strongly welcome this important step and the swift implementation that is now underway. The new centre will preserve evidence and prepare the analysis of the evidence for the prosecution of future trials, be it at national or international levels. Practically speaking, the Prosecution Centre, or ICPA, will be part of the existing joint investigation team at Eurojust. Eurojust will now proceed with the technical setting up of the centre, and we are expecting the main building blocks to be put in place in the next few months by the summer. The Commission stands ready to help put in place the necessary arrangements. It is crucial to work closely with our international partners in these efforts. We therefore welcome also the Memorandum of Understanding that was signed with the United States to step up cooperation between the United States law enforcement justice and the joint investigation team supported by Eurojust. In addition, we also launched a dialogue group, a forum to coordinate our efforts more generally with our international partners. One thing is clear, and we are getting a step closer to it. There can be no impunity for the war crimes committed in Ukraine. Those responsible for the atrocities must be held accountable, and we will do everything possible towards achieving this goal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christian. To continue, I will pass the floor to Stefan, who has good news on the negotiations concluded this weekend regarding the protection of our seas and their ecosystems. Stefan.
Bonjour tout le monde. Moi, j'ai une très bonne nouvelle sur la partie bleue de notre pacte vert.
I've got a very good news about the blue part of our Green Deal. On Sunday, an historic agreement was reached on the biodiversity of our oceans. This treaty aims to protect our oceans, to protect against the degradation of our environment, to combat climate change, and to prevent the loss of biodiversity. The treaty allows for the setting up of protected zones at sea on a large scale. This is necessary so that we can have 30% of the seas being a protected area by 2030. For the first time, the treaty also allows for the evaluation of economic activity at sea on ocean biodiversity. The EU and its member states played a key role here, thanks to the High Ambition programme. And this, as I say, is a truly historic agreement. There will be more information available at our press corner. Thank you. Thank you, Stéphane. Those are all of our announcements for today. Now I can open the floor to any questions you may have. Let me know, please, if you have questions. Mose, I see you're very motivated. Go ahead.
Yes, thanks, Dana. I came, in fact, to ask a question about related to this first announcement by Christian on accountability in the Ukraine war and what happened during the weekend, because we received, as you know, this statement by the Commission President on Saturday about the establishment of this international center for the crime of aggression in Ukraine by Russia. I would like to ask first a very small question. I mean, it's clear that Russia has committed war crimes, and its war against Ukraine, its invasion, is of course a war of aggression. I would like to ask, what about the other international crimes which can be prosecuted by the International Criminal Court in Hague, such as crimes against humanity and even genocide? Will that also somehow be covered by this new center? And if I may, a related question, does it mean that the Commission has finally decided that the future tribunal for prosecution of these crimes will be the International Criminal Court in The Hague? And if so, does it intend, let's say, to initiate, let's say, a vote in the United Nations Assembly on this, asking or advising, I mean, the court to start such an investigation and prosecution? Thank you.
Thank you, Mose. Christian.
Yeah, thank you, Mose, for your questions. That allows me, first of all, to say that we also have a daily news today on this, so where you find a bit more of information as well. And where it is also explained that, as I think I explained before, indeed, these are efforts now with the International Prosecution Center, and also our suggestion that we have put forward to then work on the creation of a special tribunal, are of course on the background of the legal situation that, as things stand, the crime of aggression practically cannot be prosecuted, which is the crime that the crime that goes after the highest political leadership and military leadership, cannot be prosecuted without the agreement of Russia in this case, or without the agreement of the UN Security Council. This is why we had proposed at an earlier stage, and there are these options papers that you will remember that we have put forward, and which are further being discussed with the Council, to come up with another solution and go in the direction of a special tribunal. Having said that, we strongly support the role of the International Criminal Court. Let me also remind that the ICC is also part of this joint investigation team and has joined it, that is supported by Eurojust. So there is close cooperation ongoing, and of course all these crimes that you mentioned can be and should be prosecuted by the International Criminal Court as it is foreseen. But specifically for the crime of aggression, where there are these legal and practical difficulties to avoid impunity, we have been working in this direction, and this is why it's an important step to set up this International Prosecution Center for this purpose.
Thank you, Christian. Susanna, is it about the same topic? Oh, then let's stay with this. Are there any other questions about this? Yes, Ksenia has the hand up in the system. Go ahead, Ksenia. Can we get Ksenia on the screen?
Yeah, I think my camera is on, so should work.
We do not see you. I don't think that your camera is on. Let's give it another try.
I even had a check before this, so this is very unpleasant. I saw myself.
I know how you feel about that. Happens here as well. But let's give it another try. We'll give you a few more seconds to try to connect the camera.
Yeah, it was actually completely connected.
Do you have any advice? No.
No, I checked it before the session. It was connected. I saw myself. So right now I'm very confused. But yeah, so, rules are rules. So
indeed. So we give you a few more seconds to try to.
There's nothing I can literally do.
Find your camera.
No, it's really on. It's.
I think
okay. Now there's some movement, but I don't know. I can just. The camera is not working. I need you, okay, for integrated, agree. Okay, let's see. Yeah! Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for your patience.
Applause is for Ksenia. Thank you for making the effort.
Okay, so the question is about the timeline, because right now, I mean, the International Center for the Prosecution of the Crime of Aggression, because we heard from Commissioner Reinders, we heard that it was supposed to be in function by July, and now Christian mentioned that the first building blocks would be up within the next 2 months, so by the beginning of the summer. Can you specify a little bit what are these building blocks and how it's supposed to actually start working, and from which month, more or less, or date? Thank you.
Christian.
Yeah, as you know, it's always difficult with such things that you do for the first time to give an exact time frame. That's why we have said by the summer. Commission Reinders has made it a bit more concrete, maybe, with July, which is also summer. So I wouldn't want to now go into a more detailed explanation of the time frame. This is something that is a high priority, and where I'm sure everybody involved and also Eurojust is working with high speed to make it work. I would refer you also to the press release that Eurojust has put out over the weekend, which gives you a bit more details of what they are doing and preparing. What has happened now is that, if you want, we have, so to speak, the legal basis, or with the signatures, to set up this structure, and now this is being done practically with arrangements being made for prosecutors that would work in that context. But as I said, you maybe take also a look at the communication of Eurojust, and stay tuned.
Thank you, Christian. Are there any more questions about this topic? Go ahead, Rafaela.
Very much. Just to specify, who will have access to this kind of database? Just countries, prosecutors who take part in this center, or also from third countries then? Thank you.
I think that's a question I would say that is best to check with Eurojust at this stage, if it's already clear. But in any case, it is in the context of the existing joint investigation team. So that already gives you a hint, but I would not want to now, give too much information of some details that might still be being set up.
Yeah. Indeed, Eurojust is better placed for this one. I think that Ksenia now has a follow-up question. Let's try to get her. Yeah. I'm sorry to say, Ksenia, now we have the image, but we don't have the sound. So try to sort that out.
I did not change anything.
Now it works. Now it works.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So I think, Christian, you mentioned 2 building blocks. I just want to know, these building blocks, are you referring, I mean, I'm pretty sure you're not referring to concrete buildings, but maybe you are. So could you please give us a little more detail on that fact that you mentioned? Thank you.
No, I'm indeed not referring to any buildings. I'm just referring, well, now you're asking me to interpret my own words. I mean, and basically what we're saying is that the main elements of the center should be in place by the summer, so that, as I said, refers to, make it basically possible for the center to start its work. But I'm not going to go any further than this now. This is work in progress.
Yeah, in this preparatory work so that the center is fully operational and operationally active by the summer. Mose, go ahead.
Thanks, because now I also have a very quick follow-up question, because from your answers, Christian, you get the impression that, as you said, this is the very first or important step. And then the question is, can this new center, which is going to be established now and in these buildings and so on by the summer, can that be seen as the embryo, let's say, of the future special tribunal for prosecuting these crimes? Thank you.
Well, I would say it is an important step in this direction. Of course, because before you can bring cases before court, you need to prepare them and have investigations and prepare a prosecution. Yes, so in that sense, it's an important step in this direction.
Thank you. We have a few more questions in the chat. I think David Price has a question on that as well. David, is the question about this subject matter?
Yes, indeed. David Price, Your Democracy. There's one...
We lost David, sound and image. We try to recover him. It's not working. Okay, so he disappeared from our systems. We give him time to come back, and in the meantime, I can take other questions. Susanna was first.
Hello there, Suzanne Lynch, excuse me, from Politico. I have a question in connection with the EU Ombudsman decision to open an inquiry into flights taken by senior European Commission officials. Is that yourself, Donna?
That's
okay.
That's for Balázs.
Okay.
But, first, we give time to Christian to move. Yeah.
Firstly, I'm just wondering, do you have a response to the fact that the EU watchdog has opened a probe into the Commission's practices on if senior officials accepting flights following the revelations that the head of DG Transport had flights paid by Qatar, not only associations but the actual Qatari state at the time the EU was negotiating an air services deal with the country?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's a strategic initiative, to be precise, and of course we don't have an answer yet, other than acknowledging it, since the deadline to answer is the 3rd of June. So of course we'll make sure to reply by the deadline. But indeed, let me just give you a few more bits of info about what we are talking about. So here, this is not a inquiry; it's a strategic initiative from the European Ombudsman. The aim of such Ombudsman initiatives is, in general, to collect information and afterwards to issue guidelines or suggestions to improve the system. So to my knowledge, this type of activity, for example, cannot lead to the conclusion that there was maladministration or similar conclusions. We also note that Ms. O'Reilly is committed in general to helping the EU institutions and bodies to improve their accountability, transparency and ethical frameworks, and this strategic initiative comes in this context, and of course we'll collaborate and reply by the deadline of the 3rd of June.
In your response, the Commission said that the fact that the top person in DG Mobility and Transport accepted paid for flights, that this was signed off, it was conducted in accordance with applicable rules, and potential conflicts of interest were carefully considered and excluded. What is the justification? How can the Commission say that there is no conflict of interest when the head senior official overseeing transport in the Commission was that his department was overseeing a deal with the country? How is that not a conflict of interest, or on what basis do you make that assumption?
Yeah, indeed. So you're very right. So the rules are very clear. Whenever there is a third party proposing to cover part or the entirety of the cost implied by a mission performed by a member of the Commission staff, there has to be two things done. On the one hand, there has to be a clear analysis on whether or not there is a potential conflict of interest, and any support received from a third party has to be declared in an internal system. Now, to be more specific, who conducts the analysis in question? This will depend on the person at hand. It's a different person for me. It's a different person for the Director General. Now, when it comes to the Director General, as head of department, he is in charge of assessing whether there is a potential for conflict of interest involved in the mission that we are talking about. So, in other words, he himself is the authorizing officer who is supposed to conduct this analysis. This is the procedure. This analysis was conducted, let me finish. This analysis was conducted in line with the applicable procedure, and at that time, in light of the elements available and in light of the information available to the Director General, he drew the conclusion that he drew. This was the procedure. This was complied with. That's what we tried to explain on Friday.
Okay. Sorry, Susanna, you want to follow up? Yes, please go ahead.
So sorry, I'm just a bit taken aback. You're saying the person who signed off on whether there was a conflict of interest was the person, was the DG himself?
For that specific case,
yes.
For that specific case, yes. But again, this will depend on the person. So the authorizing officer will change depending on who we are talking about. When it comes to the Director General, as head of department, of course, he's in charge of overseeing the missions of the people that he's in charge of in his own department. But when it comes to himself, as the top official of that department, he's in charge of doing so. If there's a case of doubt, if he's facing a doubt, he can, of course, always consult the political hierarchy. But fundamentally, he's in charge of conducting this analysis.
Sorry, Susanna, you request the floor, and the floor will be given to you. But first, you need to raise your hand, because there are many other colleagues who also want to ask questions about this. So you want another follow-up? Yes, go ahead.
A few follow-ups, if that's possible.
Go ahead.
So can you confirm...
Perhaps you can ask all your questions
Okay,
at once.
So I was going to ask who was the signing off authority, but I'm now learning that it was actually himself, the person at the centre of this. Number two, are all Director Generals, are all top officials responsible for overseeing potential conflicts of interest for themselves? Is that the policy of the European Commission? And just to confirm that these top-level officials in the DGs do not have to get authorisation from anyone more senior within the Commission for any of these trips, or anything that might come up on conflict of interest.
So Balázs will reply, but do you have any other follow-up questions that you can bundle here together, because there are other colleagues who are waiting to take the floor?
Okay, also, the very fact that the Commission said it's changing its system, or it's going to look at changing the rules, does that not in itself suggest that there's an admittance of wrongdoing there?
Thank you. So obviously, this rule does not apply only to the Director General of DG Move. It applies to all Directors General. So that's your first question. Second, if they have to check with somebody else or not, again, it's up to their own assessment. So what the rules say is that they are in charge of running this analysis on potential conflict of interest. This is what they have to do. If they are in doubt, it's not an obligation. But if they are in a doubt, then they can consult the political hierarchy. And the third point,
The first point was about changing of the rules. So we have already said in relation to certain questions, and we discussed that on Friday here in the press room, that we are going to tighten the rules regarding missions, just to clarify further such situations, and also to tighten and restrict the possibilities for accepting travel which is paid for by other organizations, and to clarify basically in which specific cases that can be accepted, and the general direction of travel in which we are going to go is that This would be only possible in the future if the third parties that finance those trips would be either the United Nations or G7 or G20, which are organizing global events for the purpose of which it is convenient for the organizers to offer the same travel and, let's say, accommodation conditions for all invited guests. So this is the direction in which we are going to go with the tightening. So we are working on revising the guidelines, and very rapidly we are going to inform all directorates general, all services about the direction of travel, and inviting them basically to already start applying those stricter rules as soon as they can. So that is with regards to the changing of the rules. In regards to the specific cases that we discussed, Balázs explained on Friday and also now at length that the individual analysis that was made was that in that specific circumstance this didn't amount to the conflict of interest, and we also explained who made the analysis and what is the system with regards to a certain review. Susanna, this is the last follow-up that I grant you, because there are other colleagues that are keen to ask questions on the subject. Go ahead.
No, just there's two parts to this. So you're saying on the record that even though a Directorate General goes to, gets their flights paid for, you've categorically saying that it was found that there was no conflict of interest, but the person who decided that was the person himself. How do you expect the European citizens to have confidence in a system where the person regulating and making the decision about potential conflict of interest is the same person who's going on the trips?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, Susan, maybe to give you a bit of a context on this. So I mentioned that there are two possibilities for a mission to be financed, but on Friday I said that a third-party contribution is done in a limited number of cases. Actually, I was wrong. It's done in an extremely limited number of cases. So the figure I managed to obtain is 1.5%. So 1.5% of the missions involves contribution from third parties. And when it comes to, for example, Directors General, whom, as we have just discussed, are essentially in charge of running this analysis, this figure goes down to about 0.1, 0.2%. So this is a very limited number of cases. But of course, this doesn't prevent an analysis from having to be conducted by these individuals. And in this particular case, as we said, in light of the elements known at that time to the Director General, the conclusion that he drew was that there was no conflict of interest, and that's why the mission took place.
And an additional element to add is that in that very limited number of cases when missions are paid for or their financial contributions from other parties, most of those take place in the EU member states in relation to events organized by the presidencies, for instance, or other member states or conferences where those guests were invited to speak. Right, there are other questions in the chat, so I would like to turn to them. So please now only keep your hands up in the chat if you have questions about this subject. I see a few of them up. Yes, Oliver, go ahead.
Hi. That's an eerie, blurry background you have on offer there. Thank you. I'd like to reiterate my question from Friday. I've never been to Doha, but the internet and its internal wisdom told me that it takes 6 hours and 50 minutes non-stop from Brussels to Doha. So I presume unless he jetted away very early in the morning and came back very late in the evening after a fairly short meeting with his Qatari interlocutors, he might have spent a night in the Emirates. I'd be interested in who paid for that and how much it cost. And in light of your confirmation now that Mr. Hololai actually authorized himself to go on these trips, wouldn't it be, in your view, in the interest of the public, but also in the interest of full transparency and the Commission's reputation, to publish his own assessments this ethical assessment you referred to that actually led to him flying for free. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Balázs, details about that mission?
Yes, so since the mission was in Doha and not in Abu Dhabi or Dubai, we are not talking about the Emirates, but Qatar. That's the first point. The second point is, so I'm assuming that you're referring, so actually I have a hard time to understand which mission you are referring to, but I assume it's the one where a third-party contribution was made by the government of Qatar. So here, what I can see from the list I have here is that the mission was carried out between the 27th of January and the 30th of January. So indeed, it lasted more than just one day. As for the documentation, when it comes to excluding conflict of interest, if you have any documentation on this, this is essentially an administrative procedure which has to be carried out in an internal system. So I don't have at hand any sort of essay in front of me which lists arguments in favor and against. Again, this is an administrative move that has to be performed in an internal system.
As to information about the accommodation, whether it was covered by the organizers?
Yes, so in this particular, when it comes to this particular mission, indeed, the third-party contribution referred to the reimbursement of a return ticket and also accommodation on the ground.
Thank you. Oliver, you have a follow-up question?
Okay, I'll be a bit less elliptic than before. How often did he stay in Qatar? How much did it cost? Was it paid for every time for all of these, I think, 9 flights that the Commission didn't pay for, but that were paid for by Qatar or the association of whatever Arab airline friends, whatever. So on all these trips that we're talking about, did he stay in Qatar? Where did he stay? What's the name of the hotels? How much did it cost? Who paid for that? And basically, the assessment I was asking for, you say, well, it's an internal document and so forth. Are you going to put it forward? Or do we actually have to file information requests for information request? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions, Oliver. So I think that what Balázs was saying is that indeed those trips were also the sort of the hospitality covered accommodation as well. I doubt that we have names of hotels or prices for those hotels in order to give you more detail about that. We will try to recover additional information that you consider relevant as we understand from your question, but we do not have at hand details regarding the price of a hotel night in the hotel where the Director General was hosted during his stay there. As to the analysis regarding conflict of interest, which was made by the Director General at that time, I think that what Balázs was trying to explain is that we are not in a possession of a document or anything which details the pros and cons or the conditions, but that the invitation and the context in which the Director General spoke and traveled provided the elements for him to make the assessment of whether that was conflict of interest or not, and the decision, or let's say the assessment that he made at the time was that that didn't amount to a conflict of interest. But I do not know whether there is any document or anything like that that can be shared, but we are going to ask about that. I think, Oliver, you have another question, because I still see your hand up. Yes, go ahead.
What about expenses during these trips? So on all these trips, as I understand, he actually stayed there at least one night. This was paid for somebody. Apparently it was not paid for by the Commission, as it probably should have been. What about expenses there?
Thank you, Oliver. So it goes to in the same direction for us to say that we are going to look into hospitality offered during those trips. because we already know that the flight and the hotel was covered. This is normally what hospitality involves. But since you want to know more detail and want to know if anything else was covered, we are going to look into that, and we will have more detailed information for you. I see some other questions in the chat. First, I will give the floor to Mathieu, and then I will come back to the room because there are a few colleagues interested here as well. Mathieu, vas-y.
Oui, bonjour.
Good day,
simplement, est-ce que vous pouvez nous donner les critères qui servent à décider s'il y a effectivement conflit d'intérêt ou pas? C'est
to determine whether there is a conflict of interest or not. I'm struggling to understand on which criteria you base that decision. Is it related to the duration of the event? Is it related to the sum of money involved? Is it related to the type of event that the person is taking part in? If you could just outline the criteria for us. Thank you. Balázs, can you give us any details on that? I don't have anything here with me. What I can say is the following. There are guidelines in place for missions by Commission employees. I don't know if there are criteria, laid out in black and white. But when the decision is made by the Director General, it's up to that Director General to carry out an analysis. I'll have to look for the criteria myself and come back to you on it. Thank you. There are questions in the room too. Stefan, go ahead.
Yes, you might have done some research. In the meantime, are there other high officials, for example, from the EAS, who were invited by Qatar or other third countries? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. So, according to the information that we have, and I'm talking here about the Commission, no other senior officials were well accepted or had trips paid by other parties from outside the European Union. So this is the information that I have regarding the European Commission. I do not know about the EAS, but Nabila will look into that and will revert. Any other questions? Yes, we had Rafaela first.
Thank you. You both mentioned that you're going to strengthen rules concerning compliance. So I'm just interested, are you going also to strengthen or to tighten the rules so that maybe in future it won't be possible that the Director General maybe authorizes its own invitations, or is it something you want to stick with? Thank you.
Thank you. Balázs, do you have any information? We are in the process of now strengthening the rules, so not all elements are known to us today, but this is a process which is ongoing. We could already offer information with regards to how we are going to conscribe and to restrict the number of cases in which that can be accepted altogether. As to the process of authorization, perhaps Balázs, you already know more?
Yes, so there's a broader context here, as I tried to explain on Friday. So the revision of the guidelines actually started back in November, initially because of essentially the greening strategy of the Commission, how to apply that to the mission guidelines, because the last mission guidelines were actually published in 2017, so it was time to review them. In the meantime, considering the developments that occurred, notably towards the end of the year, we thought that it would be appropriate to add an additional dimension. And so not only bringing in the green aspects, but also looking at, for example, how a conflict of interest is prevented through when it comes to contributions by third parties to covering mission expenses. This process is going to take some time still. We are looking at early summer. However, the elements that Dana has elaborated will go into effect with an immediate effect, essentially. So the very aspect that you are raising, we are looking into, of course, into that too. For now, what we have is what Dana has announced. But again, the process will run until the summer, so that gives us the space to incorporate additional dimensions as well in the analysis.
Thank you. There are also, what you need to understand is that basically the Directors Generals are the high echelon of the management of their respective DGs and of the administrative budgets. But of course, part of this review, we are going to look into the analysis of such conflict of interest. But anyway, if you exclude or if you reduce the cases in which free airline tickets, for instance, can be accepted to the United Nations, G20 or G7 already, you reduce the sort of the spectrum of cases where a potential conflict of interest can occur. So if that is the case, if Commission staff can only accept free tickets if it's in the context of events where the costs are covered by G7, G20 and the UN, I believe that the idea of a conflict of interest is already very, very, very much reduced. Rafaela, follow up.
Thank you. But it's not just about flight tickets, it's more about the modus operandi that someone is allowed to authorize his own invitations. So therefore, with all the Qatargate going on in the Parliament and the Commission with a reputation for the European Union, do you think it's still appropriate, or is there a need to revise this kind of process?
As I was saying, and as you were both saying, this is the system is also looked at in the process of revising, let's say, the guidelines for our missions, indeed. We had Mose and then we had David. Mose, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Dana. Well, I think that the facts are more or less already known now, as you explained, and it seems to me that this might be a kind of grey area. But the question is, why do I at all have to tighten the rules? Because wouldn't it be self-evident already now that a person cannot assess his own status on this, in this area about a potential conflict of interest, because he is himself, let's say, it concerns himself. So it would be, I would say, some kind of contradiction if you would assess it by yourself, whether you are in a conflict of interest or not. That should be done by another party, another person. And in this case, I would expect that the Director General would have possibly asked for the advice of his own internal auditor, because every DG has an internal auditor. So even if it didn't formally, let's say, violate any rules, but still he surely showed a very bad judgment if he himself, let's say, made this self-assessment, and there is always no, and well, that is the question. I mean, is that not obvious from the very start that you can't do that by yourself?
Thank you so much for the question, Mose. I think that both Balázs and Miais explain that basically, indeed, the first instance of the first layer of analysis on whether there is a conflict of interest resides indeed with the person herself in the case of a Director General, because he or she is the highest administrative echelon in the Commission, but that the persons concerned are ought to flag and to discuss and to seek advice with the political level of the Commission in case of doubt. So it would be incorrect to say or to stay at the level of saying that the Director General authorizes his or her own missions and that's it. There is this let's say, requirement to flag or to discuss or to seek advice in case of doubt regarding potential conflict of interest. But indeed, as we said, first of all, by tightening the rules so that only contributions from the UN, G20 and G7 can be accepted, already you exclude or let's say you reduce considerably the risk and the possibility of having a conflict of interest situation, because by definition, any such contribution from a third party other than an EU government in relation to a presidency or those three organizations would be excluded. So I think that this is already a very important element of clarity and of making the rules stricter. David.
Oui, merci Dana. Donc, si je comprends bien, ce que vous allez faire, au lieu de fixer des critères pour déterminer ce que c'est un conflit d'intérêt, parce que si j'ai bien compris dans ta réponse à Oliver, il n'y a pas de critères.
What I understood from your response to Olivier, that there aren't any criteria. So instead of putting criteria in place, instead you're going to limit free travel offered by other parties.
Les conflits d'intérêts, je veux dire, ça peut assumer d'autres formes. Un ticket, un match de foot du championnat
could just take on a different
offert.
shape or form. A football
Ça peut être un
ticket, for
conflit
example.
d'intérêt pour un commissaire qui s'occupe
A
de
ticket
sport.
to a football match. That
Donc,
could constitute a conflict of interest.
Je veux dire, je comprends bien.
I'm just checking
Pourquoi il
that
n'y a
I've
pas de
understood.
critères pour
Why
déterminer ce que c'est un
are
conflit
there no
d'intérêt
criteria
dans la Commission?
in
Ça, c'est ma
place
première
to
question.
determine whether it's a
Deuxièmement,
conflict of interest for the Commission or
pourquoi
not?
les directeurs généraux
Secondly,
ne doivent pas demander dans
why
leur cas personnel
don't
l'autorisation,
the director
pas à
generals
l'échelon politique,
have
mais
to
à l'échelon
ask
administratif supérieur,
at
qui est le
a
secrétaire
higher
général?
administrative level than themselves, which would be the Secretary General,
Et troisièmement,
when the
pourquoi
case is impacting them
toute une série
themselves?
de
Thirdly,
cadeaux, comme
there's
les tickets de
a whole
football,
range of
il n'y a
presents,
pas de liste.
like
J'ai regardé la liste
football
récemment des
tickets,
cadeaux reçus par les
which
commissaires.
could be given. There isn't a list.
Elle est assez limitée, je dirais. Donc,
There isn't a list of what's allowed
voilà,
and not
trois
allowed.
questions.
Those are my three questions.
Beaucoup pour les questions, David, et je pense qu'il ne
Thank
faut
you
pas
for the
mélanger les
questions,
choses.
David.
D'abord,
Now,
ce que
let's not
Balázs
get
et moi
things
venons de
mixed up here.
mentionner en ce qui concerne les changements
Balázs
des
just
règles du guide
talked
d'émission
the
s'applique
rules
à la
around
clarification
missions.
qui est nécessaire
Those rules
par rapport à
apply
qui
for
peut offrir des
clarifying
voyages
what's
ou des
necessary,
contributions
who
pour des
can
voyages
offer trips
pour
or other
pour
types of
notre staff. Et
contributions.
ça serait limité, comme je dis,
That's
aux trois
limited,
institutions.
as I've
Ça
said,
ne
to
veut pas
3
dire
institutions.
qu'on éliminera une analyse des tout conflits d'intérêts,
that the
peut-être même
analysis of any potential conflict of interest will be eliminated.
qui est associée à la mission devrait aussi être soumise à une analyse
Any aspect of the mission will have to be submitted to an assessment of a conflict of interest. It's not just about ticking a box on this analysis of conflict of interest. I thought what Balázs tried to say was that not that there are no criteria, but however, in the specific case of ticking a box for a mission, there weren't any specific criteria rather in place for the mission in question. But there are general provisions of the Commission on conflict of interest, which are quite wide-ranging and cover a number of situations. We're not just talking about ticking a box. In the case that we're talking about here, there were no specific detailed criteria that we can share with you. Now, your third question, David, was about missions and gifts that might be offered. As you know, the members of the college, and by extension the senior managers of the Commission, all, in fact, of the Commission staff, if we receive a gift, there are very clear criteria on whether it can be accepted or not. It has to be declared, and it's determined then whether the gift can be kept or not. Now that goes beyond missions. It mightn't be a trip. You might get a gift of some kind. There are very clear rules as to whether you can accept that gift or not. There is a register, a gift register. So there is a system in place, a clear system on gifts, on accepting gifts. Balázs, anything else you'd like to add? Article 11 of the statute deals with the conflicts of interest. That's the provision that we would be looking at. So, what Balázs is saying then, for specific information on a mission, for example, an assessment has to be made as to whether there was a conflict of interest or not. There isn't necessarily specific criteria attached to that type of mission. But overall, at the Commission, there are provisions on what constitutes a conflict of interest.
You mentioned that the number of cases of this kind of missions being paid by third parties are extremely limited, but so apparently this Director General was not the only one using this kind of offers. Would you be in a position to share with us a list of other EU high-ranking officials who benefited by missions paid by third parties? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We can definitely look into that. So I also said that according to our knowledge so far, no other Director General or Deputy Director General, so higher echelon, civil servant of the Commission has benefited from travel paid by other third parties since the start of this mandate outside the European Union. So that I can already tell you. So the very limited number of other trips that would be included in the statistics that that Balázs provided would be conferences inside the European Union. But we can look into that. Susanna.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification. So you mentioned there that there is a requirement to flag or discuss or seek advice in case of doubt about potential conflict of interest. Is that set out is that a legal requirement? And does it go to the Commission President? Does it go to Ursula von der Leyen herself, or who would proffer that advice in that situation?
Well, it's in the guidelines, so it's not a legal requirement, it's a guideline. It is an option for the individual in question to resort to that opportunity. It's not an obligation. The assessment is to be conducted by the person concerned, but if doubts arise, then there is this possibility. But again, it's up to individual assessment. And the guidelines are not more specific than that. They mention political authorities, so they don't go further.
Susanna, you wish another follow-up? That would be the last one, and then we go to other topics.
Do you think that the Director General in question here, Henrik Hololai, should resign?
Thank you very much for the question, Susanna. So, as we said so far, based on the information that we have, everything which was linked in relation to those missions was in line with the rules applicable at the time. Right. David has another question. Is it about that, David? Or is it your initial question that you wanted to ask when you didn't have a connection? Let's see. Can we have David? It seems, yes.
Hello? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. I had a question on the Centre for Prosecution of Aggression, but on this particular topic, could you clarify exactly what happens at the Commission level when there's a conflict of interest? Do they sign off themselves? There's been a number of cases in the past where several commissioners have attended private meetings where the accommodation is paid for by the organisers. When I raised this question in the press room, I was told, there's some ethical questions whether commissioners should be attending meetings with some of the most powerful people in the world and who have very particular financial and other interests. But the accommodation, for example, in the Bilderberg Group, is paid for by the particular organisation. And I was told when I raised the question some time ago that the commissioners involved paid for the accommodation out of their own pocket when the question was raised. I asked for the mission documents, but they were never were apparently found. So I would like to ask, what is the the Commission position, Commission policy in relation to commissioners making private visits or participating in private conferences, and is the accommodation and maybe travel paid out of their own pocket, and who actually signs off about conflict of interest when it comes to commissioners? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question, David. Allow me to say that we cannot speculate on potential participation of potential commissioners to private events. If you say that it's about traveling in a private capacity to events, it goes without saying that the commissioners or anyone else in this case would cover themselves the travel expenses. As regards in a broader sense, because again I cannot comment about the participation to a certain conference in the absence of information about that. That of course everybody in the Commission is ought to consider whether there is conflict of interest in that specific participation to a conference. But it would be impossible for Balázs and me to comment on specific events that you seem to refer to. Anything else, Balázs, on more horizontal?
When it comes to commissioners, of course, the reference document is not the guidelines, because that applies to commission staff. Commissioners are not considered as commission staff, so there the key point of reference is, of course, the code of conduct, which has a number of ways in which commissioners, of course, are obliged to look at conflict of interest aspects and prevent those. And let's not forget that the Commission also has an independent ethical body which can be consulted, for example, in such cases. So there too we have robust rules in place.
Yeah. Maria?
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. The President of the European Commission announced that experts from Commission and the European Railway Agency will travel this week to Athens. Can you give us more details? And can you tell us whether the Greek authorities requested the support of European Railway Agency during the investigations that will take place about the tragic train accident in Greece? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question, Maria. So this would be something which is rather for Stefan in relation to the agency in particular. What I can tell you is that we are open and very willing to work with the Greek authorities on all levels necessary and requested in order to support with whatever may be necessary. I can draw your attention to the fact that the President had this morning a phone call with the Prime Minister where they discuss, of course, our openness to cooperate on this, and it's in that framework that a team from the European Commission and from the Railway Agency will travel to Athens to look how we can advise, share know-how and support in any other ways with regards to a modernization of railways as would be considered necessary by the government, and in particular with regards to any safety elements that may be relevant there. But Stefan.
Thank you. Then I think you've asked whether the Greek authorities requested assistance from our Agency for Railways, from ERA. I understand that indeed this was done. I also refer to the phone call of the President, so which is one of the reasons why, of course, as Dana has explained, that we don't only stand ready to help the Greek authorities with this, but a mission will be sent to Athens with colleagues from the European Railway Agency and Commission experts. Thank you.
Yeah. We don't have more details at this stage, but we would be very happy to share as soon as we do. You have a follow-up question.
Me? Did the Greek authorities actually requested for support by the European Railway Agency?
Listen, I'm not aware of the direct contacts between the Greek authorities and the European Railway Agency. You may wish to contact the European Railway Agency for that. What I can tell you is that in the phone call between the President and the Prime Minister, the idea was discussed indeed that there would be a group of of experts from the Commission and from the agency that will travel together. We are, of course, in touch ourselves with the European Railway Agency about this, but I cannot give you any details of any direct contacts between the Greek government and the railway agency itself. What I can tell you is that in this phone conversation this morning, the idea of going together with the European Railway Agency was indeed discussed. Maria, a follow-up.
Yes, thank you. I have a follow-up regarding the new technology system for the rail safety, ERTMS, which was supposed to be in place in all the countries in Europe until 2020. However, Greek authorities announced delays in March 2022, so 2 years after the deadline. And the European Commission accepted to postpone the ERTMS deployment in Greece from 2020 to 2023, so on some sections of the network. Why is that? I mean, how do you justify this? Thank you.
I don't think I'm in a position to give lots of detailed information. I can indeed say that in May 2022, the Commission had accepted justified requests from the Greek authorities to postpone the dates for making ERTMS operational on the 3 so-called TEN-T core network corridor lines, namely the Acharnes-Gefiris line from 2020 to 2022. Also on the Titorea-Acharnes line from 2020 to 2023, and the Domokos Palaiopharsalos Thessaloniki, sorry for the absolutely awful pronunciation, where we had postponed from 2020 to 2023. According to information shared by the Greek authorities with the Commission services in January 2023, the ETCS level 1 line is under construction with completion envisaged for 2023. So yes, requests have been made, are checked by the Commission, and this is for now what I can say on the assessment which was made there.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Are there any other questions about this matter? I see a few hands up in the system. I will want you to only keep your hands up if they are about this topic. I see Maria in the system.
Hello, and thanks for the floor. Actually, 2 follow-ups on Maria's questions. The first is, if I'm not wrong, last week, Adalbert, answering to my question, said that the Greek authorities should send a request from ERA. While I had a contact with ERA, and they told me that till Friday afternoon at 6:30, there was no request by the Greek authorities. So it is crucial for us to know when this request was sent, if it was sent, or it was a decision taken during the phone call between the Greek Prime Minister and the President. This is the first question. The second follow-up is if you could provide us the reason that the Greek authorities shared with the Commission for which there was a postponement of the implementation of the ETCS system, and why the Commission accepted this reasoning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maria. So, as I said, with regards to the railway agency, we are not in the middle of contacts between government authorities and the agencies, so I cannot tell you, nor can Stefan, of any direct contacts between the government and the agency, but I warmly invite you to check with the agency for the latest information, as you mentioned that you have checked on Friday. What I can only confirm is that indeed we are ourselves as a Commission in touch with the railway agency, and we are committed to provide our joint support, and this is why we are going to travel to Greece. Our experts are going to travel to Greece to discuss with the government about modernization and the improvement of safety on Greek railways. But I cannot give you any information regarding direct contacts between the government and the agency. On the second part of the question, Stefan, what can you add?
Yeah, on the second part of the question, I'm also not in position to share much more information. We received requests following delays to postpone. What is maybe, however, important is what my colleague Vele had also said last week, that the problems related to the management of the railways, railway projects, are acknowledged by the Greek authorities, who agreed to a series of reforms, indeed, to be carried out in the coming years, which is why the Resilience and the Recovery Fund includes a milestone according to which the European Rail Traffic Management System, the ERTMS, shall be fully deployed on the PATEP network by the third quarter of 2023. So this is an important milestone in the context of the modernization of the network. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Stefan. Is it about this, Mose? Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for taking the floor again, but I just have two very brief follow-up questions. One is, can we expect that these experts from the Commission or from this Commission's agency will participate in the official investigation by the Greek authorities of this tragic accident? And secondly, is it reasonable to say that if that equipment would have been installed in time, this accident would have been prevented? Thank you.
The first part of the question, what I can tell you or what I can repeat is that the experts from the Commission and from the Railway Agency will travel to Athens to work with the authorities and to provide our technical support on the modernization, including the improvement of safety. So this is what this mission will be about, to lend our technical support for modernization and, of course, crucially, with regards to safety. The investigation is a matter for the national authorities. Anything to add to the second?
No, indeed, as Dana said, the colleagues and experts will be there to see how we can help, to map support, to map what we can do. And as Dana also said, the investigation itself is fully in the hands of the national authorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions about this? I don't see any. Any other questions for Stefan on his other files? No. Thank you, Stefan. Rosie had another question. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Rosie Burchard for DW. I'd just like some more information on President von der Leyen's trip to Canada and the United States. First of all, in Canada, I believe there's to be discussion on critical raw materials. Can you give any more details? And secondly, for the Washington trip, there's only an announcement for activities on Friday, but I believe she's already arriving on Wednesday. So do you have any other details you could share on what the President will be doing there? Thank you.
So what I can say further to what we discussed here in the press room on Friday is that indeed the President will be discussing our cooperation on anything that is related to clean tech and also raw materials during her trip to Canada. She is also going to have a meeting there with business representatives, including European businesses present in Canada. So obviously, cooperation on raw materials is going to be important in the US as well as in Canada, because in Washington too, clean tech cooperation is going to feature importantly in our discussions. And of course, the US and Canada are important partners for us in terms of cooperation on raw materials, both on the sourcing of raw materials, but also on the processing of raw materials. This is all I can tell you at this stage, but I would be happy to provide further readouts as the meetings go on. No, I have no other details on activities on Thursday, and I don't have at the top of my head the exact hour when the President will land. in the US, so I cannot tell you exactly what else, in addition to traveling, is foreseen for Thursday. I see a couple of hands up in the system with additional topics to address. So, first of all, Gérard, go ahead. We can see you, but we cannot hear you. And there is nothing we can do about it on our side, so please check your mic sources. And then, in the meantime, I will give the floor to some of the other colleagues who have been waiting for a long time in the chat. Tommaso, go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. Many thanks for the floor. Tommaso Galavotti in Kronos, Italy. It's just a question for competition, because here in Italy, Cassa Depositi e Prestiti announced yesterday a public offer for, along with the Australian fund Macquarie, for the network of TIM, the former Telecom Italia. There's another offer out there by the US fund KKR. I mean, competition is quite an important aspect of this offer, because it might raise questions. I wonder if the Commission has anything to say about this. Have you been contacted by the offer, also by the bidders, also in an informal way? Many thanks.
Thank you. Hi, Tommaso. I'm afraid you know already the answer. We have no specific comment. This transaction has not been notified to us, and as you very well know, it is always for the parties to notify transactions that do have an EU dimension.
Yep. Short and sweet. Any other questions for Ariana, as she is now on the podium? All the hands went down promptly, so thank you, Ariana. And then let's open the floor to other discussions, other points that you may have today. I still have 5 people in the chat who've been waiting for a long time. Angela, go ahead.
Can you hear me? See me? Yeah. It's about migration. Last week, the Italian Prime Minister wrote a letter to the EU institution after the shipwreck in the south of Italy, asking for a common response, etc. I was wondering if you have a reply, if you're preparing a reply to this letter, and in which, when, and which means. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Angela, for this. Anita is joining me.
Thank you very much, Angela. Indeed, we have received the letter and we will answer shortly. We also fully agree on the need to take action, and this is why the President also urged to redouble our efforts on delivering on the pact on the migration. At the same time, we need to continue with the implementation of on the Central Mediterranean Action Plan and other operational measures.
It's about migration. Go ahead, David.
Oui, merci. Et malheureusement, il y a une dimension interne et une dimension externe, donc je pose la question à Anita parce que ça fait partie du plan d'action pour la Méditerranée. Et c'est la Tunisie. Le président tunisien a lancé une campagne raciste envers les subsahariens, locaux et immigrés.
Racist campaign against sub-Saharan Africa.
Avec des théories de complot,
He's talking about conspiracy theories,
on a déjà parlé la semaine passée.
Mais we talked about this, I think, last week.
Les pays d'origine de ces subsahariens ont été contraints des voyages de rapatriement.
Obliged to organize repatriation trips.
Il y a des gens qui habitaient en Tunisie
for people living
légalement.
In Tunisia, legally. Not for migrants.
Pour cette campagne qui a été lancée par le président.
Now, as I've said, the Tunisian president, launched this campaign, Sayed, and it was for that reason that these repatriation trips had to be organized. Are you prepared to work with a regime that's becoming more and more authoritarian?
Xénophobe, raciste,
a regime that is xenophobic and racist against sub-Saharan Africa, with the aim of blocking migrants trying to come to Europe or to push them back to their countries of origin in a type of pogrom. Thank you. Thank you, David, for that question. Anita just mentioned this, but what she said was referring to possible cooperation where we will be working with our South Mediterranean neighbours.
Des droits que tu soulèves, ce serait plutôt pour Nabila.
Now, what you've specifically mentioned is maybe more for Nabila, and I'll ask her to come up to the podium. We can answer this question, all three of us. Now, I'm going to let Nabila get ready. Now, we always raise fundamental rights issues with all of our partners. Nabila is going to give us a more detailed response. Thank you, David. We did indeed talk about this recently on this podium. We're following very closely the developments and the concerns we have around Tunisia. The African Union also communicated about this subsequent to the Tunisian President's statement about migrants from the sub-Saharan area. We expect all of our partners to treat migrants with dignity. We don't want to hear racist hate speech. These are fundamental obligations under international law. It's key that policies in Tunisia are more inclusive. Tensions there need to be mitigated. The country is facing a difficult economic and social situation. The country is undertaking reforms, particularly in migration. Thank you. David, follow up.
Oui, ma question est,
yes.
Est-ce que la commissaire Johansson ou le vice-président Skinas
ou la
présidente von der Leyen sont prêts à mettre leur signature sur une coopération sur l'immigration avec un régime qui accue la politique que le service d'action externe vient nous dire EEAS tells us
don't respect fundamental rights.
Tout d'abord, David,
Firstly, David,
parce qu'on a discuté sur cette
we've discussed this issue many times. We need united and joint action. We need close cooperation with countries of origin and transit countries. We work with partner countries to set up a system where innocent lives are not put at risk. The Commission has intensified its efforts to reduce irregular departures and to reduce the loss of life on the EU borders. We've proposed in our action plan a number of actions. These actions aim to set up cooperation with the agencies of the UN and with partner countries. As Peter explained the last time, we do want to work with Libya and with migrants arriving from Tunisia and Egypt. We know, for example, that Libya is still the main country of departure for migrants, but it's closely followed by Tunisia. Egyptians, Tunisians are leaving from these places. That's why we set up this action plan with measures dedicated to working with all of our partners
qu'on peut prévenir les départs irréguliers.
To provide assistance and to prevent irregular departures. Follow up, David.
Je comprends pas pourquoi tu peux pas me répondre.
I don't understand why you can't just answer yes.
On va signer avec un régime
yes,
raciste.
We will sign this agreement with a racist regime.
Pour éviter que les migrants partent pour l'Europe.
We will work with them to make sure that migrants don't leave to come to Europe.
Pourquoi tu peux pas répondre oui au lieu de me répéter chaque fois
yes,
chaque fois que je te fais une question, tu me répètes.
Every time the same thing when I ask this question. Because, David, you have to look at things in a more nuanced manner. As Anita just presented, she talked about the objectives that we have for our cooperation with neighbouring countries on migration, Tunisia and other countries. But as part of our cooperation, we raise the issues of rights, and that's something that we will continue to do. That will be a thread we will continue to raise in our discussions with these countries. Now, if you want to have simple answers to questions, I think you need to understand how you're asking them. We work with neighbouring countries. We need to work with them. But we always emphasize the importance of fundamental rights. We emphasize that with neighbouring countries and other countries too on issues of migration. That's the answer I'm giving you. Sylvia.
Thank you. It's also on immigration. It's not on. It's on Greece. El País newspaper, my newspaper, has published today an investigation with Greek media that says that in the past few years, over 20,000 migrants have been illegally deported from Greece back to Turkey, and there were many denunciations of money being stolen, mobile phones, etc., to the migrants before being sent back to Turkey. I was wondering if given that Greece is also one of the countries that are pushing harder for a harder stance on migration, if you're aware of any of this kind of situation that many NGOs and human rights commissions have already denounced, maybe not in these numbers, but there are several reports on that. Second, how could this affect to the debate, that it's pending debate on migration that we're hoping to see in the next council, I guess? Thank you.
Thank you. Sylvia, you know our position when it comes to the need to ensure efficient border management. This must be firmly rooted in the respect of fundamental rights, including human dignity. So I'm underlying this, and the principle of non-refoulement. And also the member states need to respect their obligation under the asylum acquis and international law. When it comes to the specific point you have raised, I'm personally not aware of this, but I have indeed read it just now. Of course, this is for the national authorities to investigate these allegations. And also, in terms of the Commission, we have engaged with the Greek authorities in a close contact with them concerning allegations also over the past years. And as a result of that, the Greek authorities have also set up a three-tier system relying on strengthened internal control procedures, which are tasked with the investigation and prosecution of criminal acts arising in the context of operations by the Hellenic police or the Hellenic Coast Guard. And as far as we are currently aware, there are investigations ongoing. A second system which looks into investigations that are conducted by authorities such as the Greek Ombudsman and also the National Authority, and also the establishment of a fundamental rights officer within the Ministry of Migration and Asylum. Also, at the political level, in-depth discussions have taken place also between the Commissioner Johansson and the Greek authorities.
Thank you, Anita. Any other questions on migration for Anita? Yes, Gregorio, go ahead.
Another question on migration, because over the weekend the Italian
Gregorio, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we do not have your video. Could you please activate your video?
Yeah, I don't know how. Now, okay, excellent. Now you see me. Sorry.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I had a question because over the weekend the Italian Prime Minister said that the Italian authorities were not notified by Frontex about the ship, which was a few hundred meters off the coast of Calabria. And this seems to contradict what Frontex had said over recent days, that they had notified the Italian authorities. I would like to know from the Commission whether they, according to your information, whether Frontex has notified the Italian authorities, and eventually would you have any evidence to back up these claims? Thanks.
Thank you, Gregorio. First of all, let me reiterate that this tragedy, yet another one, recalls the need on redoubling, as the President von der Leyen has said, all our efforts to deliver on what the Commission has put on the table, on the pact in terms of long-term sustainable solutions, but also operationally in terms of targeted measures to tackle the challenges arising from the deadly route of the Central Mediterranean. When it comes to the exact nature of the operations that took place, we have two strands of work. First, I'm sure you're very well informed and aware that the Italian prosecution has started an investigation in the exact circumstances of this tragedy. And at the same time, Frontex has issued also a statement last week on the action taken on their side, which is very clear, and you will find it on their website.
Thank you. Any other questions on migration for Anita? David.
Thank you. Anita, during the weekend, the Interior Minister of the five Med5, have signed a declaration, a long declaration on the pact, on the action plan, and so on. I'm just curious on one of the points that they are raising. They are saying that the EU should improve our dialogue with relevant transport operators who, through their modus operandi, are facilitating smuggling networks. It's quite clear that they are talking about the NGO vessels, and I'm wondering if you share their view that the modus operandi of the NGOs vessels is or are facilitating smuggling networks. Thank you.
Thank you, David. You put an important question to a very complex situation, which is the same, and which shows that if we don't tackle the solutions and the causes, the root causes that are creating this situation, we will be faced with tragedies on and on. So in terms of our commitment on search and rescue, that we have covered it very well. It is for the member states to ensure this. At the same time, from the Commission side, we have said it also multiple times that the situation is complex, that there is a need to ensure a very close cooperation between the NGOs, between all actors involved, and this is why we have also proposed to revive the Search and Rescue Contact Group, which brings together national authorities, NGOs and actors involved. And indeed, we also consider that it is important to have a cooperation which is very, very close in terms of search and rescue.
Thank you. Lorenzo, on the same topic, I take it.
Yes, I actually have the same question. Do you think that NGOs are doing something that they shouldn't do, that they are facilitating the smuggling of migrants, that they should go away, they should stop sailing, going on in the sea where the migrants are possibly passing and drowning sometimes, like it happens in Italy. Do you think that the NGOs should go away? Do you think that the NGOs should stop doing their job, looking for people that are in the need of being saved at sea?
Thank you, Lorenzo. I think from our side we have been always very clear. We need to always ensure that lives are being saved, and there is a legal obligation to save lives. At the same time, we need to recognize, as I said already before, that the situation remains very complex. There are certain rescue events that often occur without cooperation or interaction amongst actors involved. So there is room for mutual commitment to work jointly and to accept each other as contacting parties. And this is why the Commission has continuously reiterated that there is an imperative to rescue and ensure that the safety of life is respected, also independent of all the circumstances that have led people in this situation. But yes, overall, we need order and we need a framework of cooperation and dialogue between member states concerned and NGOs.
Thank you very much. Anita, any other questions on migration today? I don't see that, so thank you, Anita. There were a few other hands up for other questions. I wonder if they're still motivated and if they're still waiting to ask their question. Yes, they are still there. So then let me try to get again Gérard. Perhaps in the meantime we can hear him. Let's see if it works. Yes, we...
Okay.
All good.
Okay.
Go
yes.
ahead.
Yesterday, my newspaper, Diaria, reports that there are more than 300 EU officials who are paid without working before retiring under a clause called leave of absence for service interest. And this has already cost more than 50 million euros, and I don't know if the European Commission believes this is a fair clause or it should be changed, fixed, or removed. I don't know. Thank you.
Thank you. Balázs?
Yes, indeed. So we are talking about here Article 42 of the staff regulation, which of course was incorporated in the staff regulations in 2014 when it was last reviewed. Again, it was decided by the Parliament and the Council, as is usually the case with the staff regulation. So what are we talking about here? We are actually talking about here a possibility to leave the service, not only the Commission, but any institution, linked to organizational needs, which is motivated by the acquisition of new competences within the institution. So, in short, this article allows for the possibility for staff members to essentially leave the Commission, but this cannot be earlier than 5 years before their retirement is due, and at least after a period of 10 years in service. Now, these individuals can then be replaced by colleagues who then have skills which are more necessitated by the changing environment. So the whole thing is about allowing the institutions to employ those people that have the skills that match the requirements and the changing environment of the day. What I can add is that the financial dimension of this article is set out in Annex 4 of the staff regulations. So we see that the basic salary is only maintained for a period of 3 months, and then we see a gradual decrease going all the way up to the maximum period of 5 years that can be spent in such a status, if you like.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for Balázs today? Yes, Anita, I understand your question is also for Balázs, so go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I would like to ask about the negotiations between the Hungarian government and the European Commission. In the last weeks, the Hungarian government withdrew the government members from the decision-making boards of the public interest asset management foundations to ensure their access to European funds. Are you satisfied with this change? Will it be enough to get access to Erasmus funds? And one more question, do you have further specific expectations regarding to this foundation from the Hungarian government? Thank you.
Balázs?
Yes, thank you for this question. Allow me to provide a short update. So if you recall, on the 15th of December, the Council took a implementing decision with regard to Hungary under the conditionality regime. Specifically, when it comes to public interest trusts, two concerns were highlighted by the Council. On the one hand, a concern was formulated as to the presence of senior political executives in the boards of these public interest trusts. And on the other hand, it was also mentioned that there continue to be some weaknesses when it comes to the regulatory framework, which is meant to eliminate conflict of interest in this particular context. So in the meantime, of course, we have been in close contact with the Hungarian authorities, and we have received a proposal from them to remedy this situation, and we are looking at this proposal very closely. Of course, there are continuous exchanges between the two sides. We will continue to work together with the aim of resolving this issue. As a next step, for example, Commissioner Hahn will receive Tibor Navracsics of Hungary on the 8th of March here in Brussels, which will be the next occasion to have a thorough look at where we are.
Thank you, Balázs. Any other questions for Balázs? I see that David's hand is up in the system, but I wonder if it's for Balázs. But I don't see any other colleagues interested in the room or in the chat, so I'll give the floor to David.
I had my hand up for a follow-up on the question of conflict of interest and ethics. When you have a private meeting with some of the most powerful people in the world, the industrialists, the financiers, and also politicians and intelligence heads of intelligence agencies, and the commissioners give a formal speech. I've requested in the past that these speeches should be published, and I'm wondering whether any revision of the policy is now possible, and that we can get copies of speeches of commissioners in these private meetings in what to some people look like cartel type of operations of powerful people. So it's a private meeting and we have a commissioner there. Can we have the speeches that they give there?
Balázs.
To my knowledge, David, it is at the discretion of commissioners at this point in time to decide what speech gets published and what speech doesn't get published. I'm not aware of any legal obligation at this point to do so. So these are the comments I could make on my side.
Yeah, indeed, in relation to private meetings, we would keep it at that. Anything else for Balázs today? Not the case, thank you. And I think that Ksenia has her hand up for another question, so let's take that. Can we have Ksenia on the line? It's no longer... Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So my question is about a mission to an EU mission to Moldova, which German media reported about. According to Welt am Sonntag, it's going to be a civil mission to improve Moldova's security situation. Could you give us a little bit more information on that? Thank you.
Thank you for this. Peter will come on stage to talk to you about this.
Thank you, Ksenia. The short answer is no, and the longer answer is that we are constantly looking at ways how to enhance and deepen our cooperation with important partners and neighbors, and Moldova is one of them. The European Union repeated on many occasions, most recently at the Association Council with Moldova last month, that we are committed to help Moldova in any way we can, especially in the current circumstances, but there is nothing specific in this context I would be able to announce today.
Thank you, Peter. Any other questions for Peter as he is on stage? I don't see that, so thank you for today. And then I will now finally give the floor to Sean, who's been waiting for a very long time.
Thank you very much. So Sean Carroll here from Euractiv. So Commission Vice President von der Leyen was in Germany over the weekend. Commission President von der Leyen. And she met with Chancellor Scholz. The topic of CO2 standards for cars was raised. Germany is pushing for a guarantee that the Commission will come forward with a proposal on the use of e-fuels in combustion engines. Can you tell me if the Commission is prepared to provide such a guarantee? And if so, what is the timeline for providing this, as this issue is essentially blocking the passage of the legislation? Thanks.
Since Sean, so with regards to the President's participation to the government retreat in Germany, I can tell you that the discussions were much broader and focused on a very large range of issues, including climate action, digitalization, and the state of the economy in general. And the issue at hand that you mentioned regarding cars was raised very, very briefly, as the President herself had the opportunity to say in the press remarks delivered thereafter. As to the work that we are doing in relation to that issue, Tim.
Thanks, Dana. First, let's recall the transition to zero-emission vehicles is absolutely necessary as part of our broader work to reach our climate neutrality commitment, a commitment which is supported by all the member states and the European Parliament. The CO2 standards for new cars are an important instrument to achieve this. The proposed legislation, which has been negotiated since July 2021, is technology neutral. The Commission is now working constructively to support the final vote and adoption of these proposals in the Council, following the recent vote in the European Parliament and the agreement which was reached in a trilogue at the end of last year. As Dana says, the President discussed this issue shortly over the weekend in Germany, and our contacts continue at all levels to get this proposal over the line as quickly as possible. So that's really all I can say for now. We're working on this issue. We're trying to support a rapid conclusion, and we really want to get that done quickly in the context of our broader climate transition and giving the certainty that we need to investors to make the decisions that they need going forward to meet all of these important goals.
Indeed, and as we also said on Friday, we would not speculate. It is too early to say at this stage which options we would envisage and which way we are going to land this, to get it over the line. Lorenzo, you had a question about this as well. Go ahead.
It's a simple question, Tim. We know that there are some recitals that actually mention the possibility of having e-fuels, and is it possible that without changing the regulation that has already been approved by the Parliament the agreement between the three institutions, is it possible that just working on those recitals, with engagements from the Commission to implement them, that we still have, since the proposal was technologically neutral, that we still have, after 2035, internal combustion engines with zero emissions, because this is the problem, no? Zero emissions. If the fuels are zero emission, then the proposal is technologically neutral, so we can have those engines if somebody wants still to build them. Is it possible?
I think, Lorenzo, I mean, I'm not going to go into details of what is possible. I mean, in terms of the text which has been agreed and the recitals are there, the Commission, as always, faithfully implements those going forward. There's the review clause in there to keep a constant track on how we're going towards 2035 and help the industry and help society make that transition. But in terms of specifics, I really can't say at this stage, what will be necessary to push this over the line.
Yep. Thank you, Tim. Any other questions about this? I see that David's hand is up again, but I wonder if it's about this or not. So, David, let's see. Go ahead.
It's not on this topic. I was just.
All right. So we thank Tim, and please go ahead with your question, David.
Those with a long memory might remember that I was trying to put a question on the International Centre for the Prosecution of Crime of Aggression. This is about Ukraine, but it's also about the impact on the European Union. And I wonder whether the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline, which is certainly a crime of aggression, is part of this investigation and data collection. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, I think that the crime of aggression has a clear definition. I can invite Christian to talk to you about that.
Yeah, thanks, David. No, the crime of aggression is about war crimes committed by the highest political and military leadership by a country. You can read this up in more detail in the relevant international law documents. But and I think, as we have been very clear several times in this press room on your question on the pipeline, this is a matter for the national authorities to investigate.
And we have nothing else to add on this topic, as the investigations are in the hands of the national authorities concerned. All right, I think that with that we exhausted all the questions that we had for us today. Thank you so much for an engaging midday briefing, and see you tomorrow.